Good evening. Thanks for joining us. The brother of a Grand Chute town supervisor now faces a felony drug charge in connection to a State Department of Justice investigation.
As Action 2 News first reported to you in March of 2022, investigators executed 3 search warrants on properties owned by Supervisor Wolff. Tonight we're learning that drugs were found in one of the properties searched, including marijuana, cocaine, and psilocin, also known as magic mushrooms. Only on Action 2 News, Jason Zimmerman breaks down these latest charges filed and reached out to Wolff for comment.
I spoke to Supervisor Wolff over the phone, hoping to get a response, but when I asked about the drugs found on his property and the charges against his brother, he hung up. When the State Department of Justice executed 3 search warrants against Supervisor Wolff, a house in the 4800 block of North Richmond Street in Grand Chute was among the places searched. Inside, according to court documents, a number of drugs were found, including nearly half a pound of marijuana and nearly 2 pounds of gummies containing THC. The amount of cocaine and mushrooms found weighed out at a smaller amount. Investigators say Wolff's brother Herbert told them the drugs were his and part of a stash he claimed was for personal use. However, because of the quantity of the THC found, investigators wrote, there is probably cause to believe that the THC was being held for the purpose of delivery, end quote. Just 6 months prior to the DOJ searching the property, Action 2 News investigated a complaint suggesting that Wolff wasn't a town resident and lived in Nichols. During that time, the town clerk confirmed that Wolff's voting address was changed just prior to him running for office to the North Richmond Street address, and Wolff confirmed that information during a town board meeting.
I have a residence at 4801 North Richmond Street. That is my residence. People ask me the question why my wife and my personal life about that. That is my personal life.
Wolff is also facing a felony charge of his own tied to a public contract for a landscaping business he owned. Both of these cases will go before an Outagamie County judge in August. Reporting in Grand Chute, Jason Zimmerman, Action 2 News.